Hello and welcome back to the Royal Roundup. Richard is joining us live from Boston as we speak. Richard, thank you and good morning.
Morning to you, and afternoon to you.
Afternoon, yeah, vice versa. It's 9 a.m. your time, so hopefully you've had a coffee. There is lots to go over this week. Not sure if you guys who are watching have seen the headlines. Obviously, there's lots to talk about on the tour, but perhaps some would say that's been slightly overshadowed by some other stories, which we will be addressing, obviously, on the Royal Roundup today. But of course, we will also be addressing what they are doing, the Prince and Princess of Wales on the tour, which perhaps has taken a little bit of a sidestep, but we of course do try and keep things fair, so we will be of course talking about that too. So Richard, what a tour so far. You're in Boston. How's it been?
Well, it's not been as leisurely as I thought it would be. I mean, it was always going to be busy, but we thought we had a fairly leisurely start on the first day because they weren't due to arrive until early afternoon. But of course, everything went mad because of events back home, and those events back home. Well, firstly back home, and then with Netflix, Harry and Meghan trailer being released by Netflix have, as you say, really overshadowed the tour. But it's been an interesting couple of days so far, and we've got a busy day today. Prince William's going to be meeting President Biden later on, wow. And we've got the Earthshot Prize Awards ceremony, which should be a pretty glamorous affair, I think.
Yes.
So looking forward to it.
And as someone who has been there and who has evidently seen the headlines come in and obviously seen the reaction firsthand, has the mood changed at all on tour, or are they very much keeping calm and carrying on?
I think publicly, I think they've got their game faces on, and they've been keeping calm and wanting to understandably focus on what they're doing rather than what's happening elsewhere. But behind the scenes, yes, of course, there has been a fair amount of discomfort about things, and you probably saw that on the first day, even before actually he and Kate got on the plane. Prince William authorised his spokesman to issue a statement, which he then did as a briefing for us a bit later on while they were in the air, I think, really denouncing his godmother, Lady Susan Hussey, for the comments she supposedly made to this woman at Buckingham Palace reception. And I think, well, perhaps we can come on to that. I don't know if you want to come on to it now or come on to it later.
We can talk about it now. We'll be talking about all the topics in depth.
Yeah. And it was very interesting that, it was all within a couple of hours. It had been, as far as they were concerned, I suppose, dealt with. I mean, there are all sorts of repercussions and spin-offs, but I think my phone started buzzing at about 5 o'clock in the morning here, 4:50, I think it was, and things, it really built up quite quickly, and we were asking Buckingham Palace what's going to happen about this lady making complaints about the most senior, really, lady in waiting for the last 62 years. Asking a woman of Afro-Caribbean origin, where are you from? Who was born in London, born in England? Where are you from? Where are you really from? And the palace reacted pretty quickly, I have to say. I mean, there was a fair bit of nudging going on. Are you going to say something about this, or is it just Buckingham Palace declined to comment? And then suddenly there was a statement on the way, and that was it. She was out. She'd resigned, and Prince William had obviously decided that he needed to address it. And I mean, I think it's quite interesting that as we saw with the Welsh England issue,
Mm.
slightly less serious, you might say. But I think there's a new style at Kensington Palace where they are trying to address these things head on,
Yeah.
rather than letting them fester.
And
Um,
do you think that's a slightly different style as to that of the late Queen?
oh, definitely. I mean, I think it's obviously you can't know for sure, but I would have been very surprised if the Queen was still on the throne, if Lady Susan had actually resigned as a result of that. I think she would have been kept on. I think there would have been either never explain, never complain, or possibly some sort of statement, apologising for any misunderstanding. But I think the King has a different attitude, and times have moved on. I think Phil Dampier made a point in a column in our paper, which I thought was a very good one. That 25 years ago, people like Prince Philip might have been saying something similar.
Mm.
I mean, I don't think anybody seriously believes that Lady Susan Hussey was deliberately trying to provoke or being deliberately racist. But I just think you can't get away with saying that sort of
No,
thing.
and obviously in a public facing role, when she is meeting people from different types of backgrounds, from different religions,
Yes,
different races, you need to be very particularly aware, especially when you're representing the royal family, about what exactly you're saying.
yes. So I think society has moved on, and I think one of the things we as correspondents have been discussing a little bit, and some of um, the palace staff, I think, have been concurring without expressing too many of their own personal views, is that I think. I mean, slightly related point. I think the days the of Queen Elizabeth, Prince Philip, um, or other members of the royal family going abroad and everybody just saying, delighted you're here, happy clouds, clapping and cheering. I think possibly have gone. I think they this generation of royals, or really two generations of royals, um, are going to face more problems wherever they go. It's just how the world has moved on. Um,
Yes.
and I think they're just getting used to that, having to get used to it, really.
And obviously, as you've already said and pointed out, this is William's godmother. So this is obviously quite a personal relationship as well for him. Has he given any indicator in Boston about his upset towards it, other than the statement?
He hasn't at all. No,
No.
no, and obviously the statement was made on his behalf by it was his spokesman saying it rather than him saying it himself. But I know it must be very, very difficult. I mean, obviously, you don't choose your godmother,
No, you don't.
your parents do, but Lady Susan Hussey has been a very close friend of the royal family of um, Charles the King and Queen Consort, and of the previous generation of royals for many, many years. She served as lady in waiting for 62 years.
Yes.
And it must have been a really, really difficult morning for all of them, I think. And clearly there's been a backlash, as you would expect with any of these stories. Some people have said that she's been thrown under a bus and that she shouldn't have been forced to resign. Um,
Yeah,
opinions,
and
opinions
the
vary.
other side of things are people saying, "Good that she resigned." They're setting a standard of what's acceptable and what's not. Um,
Yes,
as ever, people are divided on it.
yes,
Um, do you think that she'll still have, obviously, as you said, she's a royal family has been her life and her dedication for many, many years. Behind the scenes, do you think she'll obviously, on a personal level, still stay close and she'll be looked after?
Oh yes, I'm sure. Yes, I'm sure I'm sure the friendships will remain, and they'll continue to see her behind the scenes. But I think that formal role. I mean, it might have been time for the new monarchy to draw a line under the previous monarchy anyway. So,
Mm,
um, I mean, Lady Susan was one of three former ladies in waiting kept on and given new titles of ladies of the household to help host events. Her role was to host events like the one at Buckingham Palace earlier this week. But
mm,
I got the impression that it was about bridging the gap. It was about perhaps a fairly temporary measure to have people who'd served under the previous Queen carrying on for perhaps a short while. We'll have to see.
yeah. So it's definitely drawn a line and perhaps set a standard um, to how the monarchy are very much going to play things in terms of these issues, which do come up and are spoken about, and it's not going to be hush hush anymore. Okay, so they've obviously dealt with that on the Boston trip whilst trying to get on with things,
Yeah.
and then as of yesterday, a trailer drop for Netflix. We knew that this was coming, didn't we, Richard? We just didn't quite know when.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think a lot of people would have suspected that it might come during this during this trip, and sure enough, it did. And I think there's a fair amount of anger, but also resignation within the royal household about this. I think um, it's a really tricky issue for the king. I think it's the king and for Prince and Princess of Wales and other members of the family. How do they deal with this issue of um, a couple who are um, essentially free to do what they like and using every opportunity, it seems, to take pot shots at the ones who are doing the work.
it does. Dorothy said, interesting that Lady Susan Hussey said at Harry's wedding it would all end in tears. I'm not sure whether you know this, Richard. Also, did she contribute anything to Tom Bower's book? Seems a bit too much of a coincidence that she's been accused of such a crime.
Well, I don't know about whether she contributed to Tom Bower's book. I mean, she was certainly quoted in Tom Bower's book, telling people I think it was a dinner party, that it would all end in tears. And I think one of the problems. We've said that they've dealt with the issue summarily, really, but it doesn't take away from the fact that her comments add fuel to the fire, because they would appear to support what Harry and Meghan
Yeah.
have been alleging about
Mm.
attitudes within the institution of the monarchy.
Yeah.
So
And that hasn't come from Harry and Meghan either. That is very much come from an entirely different source. So
exactly. I mean, you have to say that this, as far as I understand it, this lady who made the complaint has been on record criticising the royal family previously for um, over their treatment of Harry and Meghan. So obviously, some people are saying, well, she had an axe to grind, but there were other witnesses to the conversation. There doesn't seem to be any doubt about
said,
what took place, really.
mm, mm.
Um,
And
so
obviously,
how do they deal with it? This is the problem. So um, I know because I've been reporting on the royal family now for getting on for over 18 years, that the king, in particular, the king and his family, they're the last people you would say are racist. They really are. Uh, but they have an image problem and they have to deal with it. And they've tried to deal with it by um, you know, talking about diversity and inclusion, as an employer, by increasing the number of people from minority backgrounds who are employed in the royal household. But when attitudes like this are still displayed, then they, clearly it doesn't. The problem continues.
What can the king do then? What can the king do? Can he give training to anybody who's within the royal family, and especially perhaps people from different generations who seem to think that this sort of questioning is acceptable today? What
Well, well,
will his
yes.
plan be?
Well, yeah. I mean that would seem an obvious thing to do. I mean, there was talk of the palace employing a diversity and inclusion czar, I think was the phrase used, a sort of head honcho for diversity and inclusion issues, which we've got at our employer. That doesn't seem to have happened. So perhaps that's something they might look at again.
I know the lady in questions also said that she's happy to work with the royal family as well, who was involved. Neil, after the biggest smear campaign in British history, good luck to them. I want to hear their story. This is obviously in regards to Harry and Meghan's Netflix documentary, and so many people do want to tune into this Netflix documentary. Some people are fans of Harry and Meghan, some people who aren't, just to hear what they've got to say. So, how are the royal family going to pretend like this isn't happening? Are they going to respond at some point? Because it's sort of like the elephant in the room.
Yes, well, that's going to be an interesting one for them. And there's a whole series of controversies. Really, they've had the Crown where they didn't really respond, but I know that they were concerned that people, particularly in America, might think that it's actually true rather than a work of fiction very loosely based on historical events. And now you've got this Netflix thing coming up. You've got Harry and Meghan accepting an award in New York on December the 6th from the Robert Kennedy Foundation for what we've been told is for sort of standing up to structural racism. At the same time as Caroline Kennedy is meeting William and Kate in Boston, both at the basketball and I think she'll be there again today. I think, then of course you've got Harry's memoir coming up. So it just won't go away. And I think they're scratching their heads thinking, well, what is the best strategy? Do you try to respond and risk just fanning the flames, or do you just try to get on with what you're doing? But I mean, it's very difficult for them because, as you say, it's the elephant in the room, and I think I've made this point before, but it makes it so difficult for them to tackle some of these issues like racism. I know, I'm just going back to the King. We know, because we were briefed at the Commonwealth Summit in Rwanda, that he wants to really focus on things like slavery and gain, he wants to see the British public have a much greater understanding of what happened during the days of the British Empire with slavery. In the same way that we learn about the Holocaust, for example.
Yes.
And every time he tries to do something, this issue rears its head again.
Do you think that perhaps by opening the door to commenting on this kind of thing, that the royal family will be worried that then they've set a precedent? And every single time Harry and Meghan do something, that they'll feel the need to respond.
Well, yeah, that is. I suppose that's always a problem for them. But obviously, we did get that statement, didn't we, about recollections may vary.
Mm.
So they've already set a precedent in that respect.
Yes, yeah, they certainly have. I'm going to guess then that the Prince and Princess of Wales aren't going to be doing a private, personal trip to Harry and Meghan when they're in the
No,
US.
I don't think that was ever going to happen, and I think, I mean, on the one hand, you could say the timing of this Netflix trailer is possibly out of their control, and if, as is reported, the first episode will air on December the 8th, then you would expect a
Yes.
trailer, promotional material to start being released about a week before. But we saw the same arguments in 2019 when ITV released trailers of their documentary that they'd done on Harry and Meghan in Africa, while William and Kate were in Pakistan, and we know then that they were extremely hacked off that had happened during, and really derailed their tour, and they haven't. People close to them haven't been quite as obvious about that this time. I mean, they've tried to just sort of say we're trying not to be distracted by events elsewhere. We're just getting on with it. But I think it inevitably that's what's been going on.
There's obviously going to be a strain, as there would be with any family. The public aren't naive. This will obviously be creating even further rifts down the road for their relations. Is there any way back after a huge Netflix documentary? We've already spoken about Oprah, all of these various interviews that have gone on, and then obviously Harry's book. They've still got titles, Richard. So is there any way back from this to really get things okay again after everything that is going to come out, which is undoubtedly not going to reflect very well on the institution as a whole?
Well, it's very hard to see a way back for them all. But if I was working for them, I would be trying to find some way of smoothing a path towards some sort of reconciliation. I mean, clearly, they do speak to each other as a family. Certainly, the King and Harry speak, but it's not. In the past, I've talked about how they are able to draw a distinction between who they are as a family and who they are as a family firm. And so, we saw, for example, the Queen, having to make difficult decisions about Andrew for the sake of the firm, but still keeping close to him as her son. And I think it's possible for them still to reconcile as a family behind the scenes, but very difficult for everybody concerned if their modus operandi, if the Sussexes' modus operandi is to continue to try to monetize their story as they see it.
I mean, looking at this picture, they're obviously in deep distress. They're obviously genuinely very upset by things which have happened, allegedly happened. They are obviously not happy with how things have gone.
It certainly looks that way. I mean, they could be laughing, I suppose, but it doesn't look like it. And certainly, there's another picture that was released yesterday, which again, I think she's on a bed where it looks as if Meghan is possibly crying. So, yeah, this, of course, this is a couple who said they wanted privacy. What they really meant was they wanted control over their images. And there we have a look. And yet they're releasing some very intimate pictures behind the scenes. I think one that we all seized on yesterday was a picture taken at the Commonwealth service at Westminster Abbey in 2019, where William and Kate are looking to the left, and Harry and Meghan are behind them, so they're not looking at each other, but they all look sort of daggers drawn. Kate in particular, and so that sort of that trailer immediately dragged William and Kate in particular into the whole story yesterday about that particular trailer.
And Kate seems quite emotive with all the charity work and everything she does. She's putting on a brave face, obviously, but as someone who's obviously very, close to working and reporting on the royal family, have you seen a shift in Kate's mood since all of this has happened?
No, not really. I mean, she's very good at toughing it out. Actually, I mean, that's always been the case with her.
Yeah.
I can remember back in 2012, I think it was, when we were in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, I think, when the story broke that a French magazine had published topless pictures of her, and William just had a face like thunder, and you could tell from the body language that being brought up in that world where there was always somebody to do something for you, he was really sort of lashing out, wanting his staff to sort it out for him. And there was one particular point where, I mean, I'm not a lip reading expert, but it certainly looked as if she was just saying, look, just just smile, keep smiling, and let's just go on with it. And I think that was one of the first times that we really saw that sort of tough side of her.
They very much do come across like a team. Do you think that this is actually bringing them closer together?
Well, I think they're pretty close anyway. They look pretty tight as a couple. So I suppose we should talk about what they've actually been doing here. Although, I mean, it is quite interesting because like all journalists, I get criticised on all sides.
Yes.
Why aren't you focusing on what they're actually doing? Why are you letting Harry and Meghan or this row back in London interfere with coverage of what's going on? But, I mean, I was interested in what you were saying just before we came on air, that the stories we are writing online, certainly about what they're actually doing in Boston, are getting very little traction. That all of the traction is coming from what's the controversies.
Yeah.
So I think that's partly an answer to those people. But we have been writing about and covering what they've been doing here, and obviously they're here for the Earthshot Prize awards ceremony later on today, which I think probably most people tuning into this will know is sort of Nobel Prize style award scheme that William invented to try to encourage innovation, technological innovation, to tackle climate change and the other major economic crises that our planet is.
And this obviously has been learnt from the king. I imagine his passion for this because of how much his father is very much well, he used to be before he became king. He is now, but he can't spend as much time on it about climate change.
Yeah, well, and also from Prince Philip and the Queen. But Prince Philip, I mean, Prince Philip always used to say he wasn't a tree hugger, but he was an environmentalist, and I think a lot of it comes from him as well. But yes, so that's the reason for being in Boston, and they came to Boston because Earthshot was inspired by President John F. Kennedy's Moonshot, the project announced to get a man on the moon by the end of the 60s. and all of the technological advances that came from that project. So Boston was a natural choice for these second awards after the first ones in London. And so their program has really been designed around that. They got a very warm welcome at City Hall when they arrived.
That's good.
Had 1,000 people outside in the pouring rain, and yesterday they again, decent sized crowds coming out. Mostly women. I mean, I'm always interested. It is mostly women at these events. People really thrilled to see them, and yesterday they went to a company that has helped set up 500 firms bringing about technological innovation in this area, clean technology, but they also went to a really interesting project for young people that is using brain science to really try to halt that sort of cycle of young people getting involved in gang violence and other violent crime. So sort of looking at it from that way, is how young people's brains are wired, and how to advise them to get out of that cycle before it's too late.
And obviously, a lot of the arguments towards having a royal family is there's this whole, fans, I guess, is the best way to put them, from overseas, internationally. From being on this trip, Richard, they've obviously not been there, I think, for 8 years or something. Do you think that there's obviously very much an argument for this?
Oh yeah, I mean, we always talk about this being part of soft power, Britain's soft power. The fact is that many Americans are very interested in the British royal family, whilst being glad, most of them, that they're a republic, but they're still very interested in the British royal family, and although not basketball fans, as we discovered.
Yeah, I heard this.
But yes, it's the fact is most. I think a lot of people. I've got a friend who's an ambassador, and she always says that people are much more interested in what members of the British royal family have got to say than politicians who come over to various countries from the UK to speak. So, it's a very useful way of getting British values across to people overseas. Yes. But yeah, going back to basketball, we did. We did. They were booed. They were booed a couple of times when they were introduced and shown on the big screen at the basketball.
Deary me.
And I got all sorts of stick on social media, very similar to when Harry and Meghan were booed coming out of St Paul's Cathedral at the Jubilee event in the summer. And clearly there's a mixture. There's always a mixture of boos and cheers and catcalls, and sometimes on video that doesn't come across. It just comes across as indistinct. But make no mistake, there were a lot of boos.
How did they handle that? Did they just sort of laugh it off?
Yeah, they did. Well, we some of us as journalists were just talking about it afterwards and saying, actually, they handled it really well, because they were supposed to leave after the third quarter, but they actually stayed right till the end of the game. They enjoyed it so much, and I think fair play to them that they didn't take it to heart, because I don't think it was political, for want of a better phrase, or personal. I don't think it was US basketball fans saying you've treated your members of your family badly or anything like that. I think it was just Boston Celtics fans have got a reputation for being the most raucous and some would say most offensive sports fans in the US. And Bostonians have told me they boo everybody. We boo everybody. So I don't think they're going to take it to heart. But no, it was a great evening actually. I think they had a lot of fun watching that game.
Good, good. So looking on to the rest of the week, albeit hopefully there won't be any other headlines coming out. I think they've dealt with enough, but they do say 3 times, don't they? It's a third time, whatever that
Well,
might.
yeah, they've been so unlucky, haven't they? Because their last major tour, as when they were still Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, to the Caribbean, was completely overtaken by controversies over racism, slavery, colonialism,
Yes, yeah,
and
yeah.
and here we are again. There are some things that are just going to be out of their control, and unfortunately, one of them is what some members of their family are exiled family members are doing and saying.
Do you think Charles will be in regular contact with them, supporting them throughout this?
Um, I I don't know how regularly they will speak on a tour like this, but I think they're the king will be concerned and will be keen for this trip to be a success, because for a number of reasons, and I don't think the royal family would say this publicly, but I think their image abroad is important for the UK, and important for the monarchy. And I think a lot of people have seen this as an attempt to reset the image of the royal family in the US, which has been affected by the controversy over the Sussexes' departure, and the media coverage in the US about that. And I think there's been evidence from polling showing that that William and Kate remain the most popular British royals in the US. I think that's been true really throughout the last few years. But the Sussexes' departure did hit the royal family here, and so this is a chance for a reset. And it's unfortunate for them that it's been slightly overtaken by events.
How much time do they have left over there to try and smooth things over before they come back to the UK?
Well, it's only today that they're coming back. They'll be back. They'll be back in England over the weekend. So
Right.
today's a big day. But so we've got today. Kate's going to Harvard, to a centre there that's looking at her major area of interest, the early years of children. William's going to the JFK library and museum, really to pay tribute to the late president and the inspiration that Kennedy's words gave for him in setting up this Earthshot project, meeting Biden, and then we've got the awards ceremony, which I think everybody's really looking forward to.
Yeah, hopefully it'll end on a more positive note. So obviously the children aren't at boarding school. Who will they be looked after by at the moment? I'm guessing their nanny, and Catherine's mother as well is quite close, aren't they? So
yeah, I mean, I haven't asked, but normally I think Kate's mother will help out along with the nanny when they're away like this.
Interesting. Okay, then, Richard. We did have a poll on Meghan and Harry's Netflix documentary, which we can bring up. So, do you think Netflix should have released Harry and Meghan's trailer at the time, which didn't conflict with Catherine Williams' trip? Yes, it shouldn't clash, 62%. There we go. But some people did think it should clash, apparently, 37%. But yes, you have got a very busy day ahead. You've had a very busy few days. So we can't keep you any longer. But thank you so much for coming on from Boston. Very, very kind of you.
Sorry, I couldn't show you panoramic views of Boston.
No, we've got a nice picture behind you of a damp street. But yeah, Richard, thank you so much for coming on. We'll be back when you're back in the UK and you've got over your jet lag next week. But yes, thank you. And fingers crossed the rest of the tour is not overshadowed.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Bye bye.